The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is almost here, and this video will catch you up to speed on everything you need to know before launch. Whether you're a newcomer to the series or a longtime fan looking to see the latest information in one place, this ultimate preview will cover everything from the game's announcement all the way up to the most recent news from Nintendo's gameplay demonstration, which showed us our most detailed look yet at what we can expect when Tears of the Kingdom releases. This video will not contain any spoilers from the leaked art book and will only cover information that's been officially released by Nintendo, as well as some theories and speculation based on that information. Also, I know this is a lengthy video, so chapter markers are included below, which means you can instantly jump to any section you want to hear more about. First, let's cover the basics. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom will release exclusively for the Nintendo Switch on Friday, May 12th, 2023. Nintendo originally announced the game with a first look teaser trailer back in June of 2019. At the time, no official title was given, and Nintendo simply referred to it as the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Much of the title's development remained shrouded in secrecy for nearly 2 years from its announcement, but at E3 2021, Nintendo showed off gameplay for the first time in the form of a new teaser trailer, which also included a 2022 release window. In March of 2022, however, Nintendo shared a development update announcing the sequel would no longer hit that target, but would instead release in the spring of 2023. 6 months later, in September of 2022, the first official trailer for the game dropped, complete with the final name, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, as well as a new release date of May 12th, 2023. A second official trailer dropped in February of 2023, and then a full-on gameplay demonstration in March of 2023, which is when Nintendo announced development was complete, and that the title would in fact hit its May 12th release date. We'll take a look at all of these trailers in more detail later in this preview. Tears of the Kingdom marks the 20th entry in the Legend of Zelda series. It's being developed internally at Nintendo by the EPD Production Group No. 3, which is the studio dedicated solely to the Legend of Zelda series. The team started work on the project in 2017 after completing production on Breath of the Wild. Longtime producer Eiji Aonuma is once again at the helm for this title. Aonuma worked as the director and dungeon designer for 1998's The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and he's remained heavily involved with the series ever since. Releasing a direct sequel with the same overall style is something Nintendo has only done a handful of times throughout the series' history. The most notable example is probably The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which is a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time. Aonuma played a major role in the development of Majora's Mask, which had a ridiculously short development time. Breath of the Wild released alongside the Switch in March of 2017, and while it's hard to separate it from the incredibly successful hybrid console, it's important to remember it was originally developed as a title for the Nintendo Wii U. In addition to releasing on the Switch, Breath of the Wild still released the very same day on the Wii U, despite the poor sales of that system. So even though Tears of the Kingdom has quite a few similarities with Breath of the Wild, it's important to note this game has been developed solely for the Nintendo Switch system. Despite that, Tears has actually been in production even longer than its predecessor. By the time it releases next month, it will have been a full 6 years since Breath of the Wild's 2017 debut. After the initial announcement that a sequel was in development, Aonuma told Game Informer that one of the reasons they wanted to continue immediately after Breath of the Wild was because he, quote, wanted to revisit that Hyrule again and use that world again, while incorporating new gameplay and new story, close quote. Initially, they were thinking of DLC ideas, but eventually hit a point where they felt they had way too many ideas for a DLC. Tears has long been anticipated by fans and was even nominated 3 straight years for the Game Awards Most Anticipated Game and 2 straight years for the Golden Joystick Awards Most Wanted Game. It ended up winning both awards in 2022. It's no surprise to see the buzz around the title, considering Breath of the Wild is not only one of the highest reviewing Zelda games of all time, it's also the best-selling title in the series at somewhere around 30 million copies sold, a staggering number for any game, but even more so for a first-party exclusive, and a launch title at that. Tears of the Kingdom will be the first Nintendo Switch game to launch with a $70 price point for the standard version of the game. There's also a $130 collector's edition, which will include a hard copy of the game, a collectible pin set, steelbook, icon art poster, and an art book. Additionally, Nintendo is releasing a special edition version of the Switch Pro controller for Tears of the Kingdom's release, as well as a Tears of the Kingdom carrying case. And even though the new title won't be releasing alongside a a new Switch Pro or Switch 2, Nintendo is releasing a limited edition OLED version of the console that features 2 gold Joy-Cons as well as special art for the back of the Switch system and the console's dock. It's important to note this system does not include a copy of the game. A new Link Amiibo for Tears of the Kingdom is also on the way, set to release the same day as the game. Nintendo has confirmed in-game Amiibo functionality. Scanning the figure will grant players weapons, materials, and a special fabric for Link's paraglider. They also mentioned scanning other Amiibo from the Legend of Zelda series, but don't specifically outline which ones or if all of them will be supported in Tears of the Kingdom. When it comes to the game's story, Nintendo has kept many details hidden, as they so often do. Across all of the various trailers, though, fans have been able to piece together some details in addition to making quite a few educated guesses about where things could be heading in the sequel. But first, let's cover the information revealed directly from Nintendo that doesn't require any speculation or theory crafting. We know the title is a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild and will feature the same Zelda and Link we got to know in the first game, at least presumably. I think it's a pretty safe bet the game takes place after the events in Breath of the Wild, but with the series' history of traveling through time and even other dimensions, it's hard to say for certain if everything we do will take place chronologically after Breath of the Wild. The first look trailer shows Zelda and Link making their way through some sort of cave toward what appears to be Ganon, and he's being held in place by this mysterious hand. The trailer focuses heavily on 2 opposing elemental forces, the first being this green effect we see with the hand here, and then the red effect here, which should be familiar to fans of the first game. The red represents the corruption of Calamity Ganon, and this force was seen on many occasions throughout Breath of the Wild. The events of Breath of the Wild really kick off thanks to a prophecy that foretold the return of Calamity Ganon. The Hylians took this prophecy seriously and decided to search for the resurrection site. As they were doing so, they unearthed 4 massive mechanical beasts that could be used to stop Calamity Ganon. They chose 4 pilots as champions to assist Zelda and Link in sealing Ganon away. Unfortunately for the champions, Ganon knew of the prophecy and took control of the Guardians and Divine Beasts, killing the champions and wounding Link in the process. And so Zelda remained alone, doing battle against Ganon and waiting for Link's return. When he finally wakes up in the Shrine of Resurrection, 100 years had passed since Ganon defeated the champions. Unfortunately, his injury resulted in memory loss, and it's only through the course of the game that Link will slowly regain these fragmented bits of his memory. Link frees each of the Divine Beasts from Ganon's calamity, as well as each of the 4 Guardian Spirits. He also retrieves the Master Sword, which Zelda had hidden away for safekeeping years earlier. With the Master Sword in hand and all of the Divine Beasts free, Link finally rejoins Zelda, and the 2 are able to seal Calamity Ganon away, at least until whatever is going on here in Tears of the Kingdom. Link, Zelda, and Ganon all appear set to return here in the sequel, and despite much speculation over the years about playing as Zelda or even Ganon, what we've seen so far points only to Link. Surprisingly, we've only seen a handful of other characters pop up in the trailer so far. There's a Korok wearing a backpack here saying he needs to find his friend, and we catch a brief glimpse at Beetle here at the Dueling Peaks stable. He served as a merchant in Breath of the Wild and will likely serve a similar role in the new game. There's also a non-hostile character labeled as a Ranger construct that players can talk to, although we have yet to see the dialogue or what their role may be in the game. Now, while we know at least a little bit about Calamity from the first game, it's the green force that has fans speculating the most. In the short first look trailer, we saw a quick shot of the green arm appearing to overtake Link's right hand. We see a quick shot of the Calamity spreading and also what seems to be Link and Zelda reaching for one another. The Calamity finally reaches Ganon and appears to resurrect him, at least in some form, and then Hyrule Castle appears to be overtaken by the Calamity as well, breaking and even rising up into the sky. The teaser trailer in 2021 would give us a bit more with these 2 opposing forces. We see more of the Red Calamity and a very quick flash of Link's right arm that's actually getting pulled into the corruption. There's another quick shot of Calamity Ganon appearing very much alive, and even Zelda falling into a pit of darkness. The trailer then cuts to Link falling from the skies in completely different clothing and a right arm that's been altered, presumably by whatever happened underneath Hyrule Castle with Zelda and Ganon. Bokoblins are back once again, and we see yet another shot of Hyrule Castle rising from the earth surrounded by Calamity. The delayed trailer in March of 2022 was mostly about the release window shifting, but we also saw a brief glimpse at a clip that could have a major impact on both the story and gameplay in Tears of the Kingdom. Aonuma also mentioned that the game would not only take place on the ground in the sequel, but in the skies above as well. We see Link in those tattered clothes once again, and another look at his right arm, but most importantly, we see him holding what appears to be a broken Master Sword. One of the most interesting details to consider here is actually the logo for Tears of the Kingdom, because the sword itself is featured in the logo for the game, at least part of it is. Obviously, the sword is an iconic item from the franchise and will almost certainly play a key role in the game, but what I I'm most interested in is how we can see this mysterious green force appearing to actually complete the broken section of the Master Sword. To be fair, this could totally just be a fun little logo design trick that the designers thought looked great, and I have to agree, it looks fantastic, but I think we have to seriously consider the possibility that this could very well be hinting at a story element from the game, such as the possibility that we'll need to use the green force to somehow repair the Master Sword. The next trailer, which Nintendo calls trailer number 1, starts with a focus on these mysterious glyphs, with plenty of fans speculating about who they could be depicting. What's clear in this shot is that there appears to be a great battle occurring with one side surrounded by the force of calamity and an opposing force without any calamity around them. This is also the trailer where Nintendo confirmed the name as Tears of the Kingdom. It's also important to note they clarified that Tears is the correct pronunciation, and it's not meant to be Tears, as it was originally unclear to which they were referring to with the title. Tears have appeared in the series before in the form of sacred tears in The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. These tears are located in the Silent Realm of the Faron Woods, Elden Volcano, Lanayru Desert, and Skyloft. In that game, the tears would halt the movement of guardians for 90 seconds, and you needed to collect all 15 to pass each trial. It remains to be seen if tears will return as an item in this installment of the series, but one thing's for sure, everyone has noted the overall darker tone in many of these trailers, with some even speculating that Tears of the Kingdom could represent the definitive end of this Zelda timeline. Yet another trailer, this one named trailer number 2, gave us even more insight into the story with multiple lines of dialogue this time, starting with this one.
Rise, rise, my servants. Sweep over Hyrule. Eliminate this kingdom and her allies. Leave no survivors!
Many believe this voice belongs to Ganon himself. The trailer shows even more calamity spreading, enraged bokoblins, and plenty of other enemies, and even another shot of Ganon with the calamity taking hold of him. Perhaps this battle that we're seeing is actually the one we saw depicted in the trailer before. But the sinister voice is not the only one we hear in the trailer.
But Link, I am not sure you'll be able to stop him.
Wherever we find ourselves at the start of Tears of the Kingdom, it appears that Ganon seizes the upper hand fairly early on, and at this point, Zelda is recognizing the severity of the situation. But the most mysterious line actually comes near the end of the trailer when we hear Zelda again.
Please, lend him your power.
Who could Zelda be speaking to here? She is clearly issuing a plea for someone or something to lend us their power. It's possible she's speaking to the source of that mysterious green force that we've seen throughout the trailers to this point, and the very same force that appears to be powering Link's new right arm. And that leads us to the Zonai. Die-hard fans are probably surprised we've made it this far into the video without yet mentioning the Zonai. You may remember a bit about them if you played the first game, but to summarize, they're a mysterious race that left behind structures in Breath of the Wild, and according to that game, they appear to have vanished a long time ago. The Zonai ruins in Breath of the Wild actually stretch all the way from the Demel Forest to the Spring of Courage in Faron. The barbarian set armor is gifted by monks that Link finds inside the 3 vast mazes in Breath of the Wild, and it's believed these mazes relate back to the Zonai. And many fans have also speculated that this green effect is at least somehow related back to the Zonai. Now, it's not all just speculation. The Zonai have in fact been confirmed to feature at least somewhat, we don't know how prominently, but they are for sure playing a role in Tears of the Kingdom thanks to our final official reveal from Nintendo, which came in the form of a gameplay demo. This gameplay demonstration focused primarily on Link's new abilities, which we'll touch on here shortly. But in doing so, they also revealed 2 creatures that are at least somehow connected to the Zonai. The first, a construct enemy here, which appears on one of the Sky Islands and attacks the player. We see that green energy again here, and it almost appears to be powering this enemy. Perhaps more interestingly, we come across another of these constructs, this one labeled as a Ranger construct, but this one is on the surface, not in one of the Sky Islands, and it also doesn't appear to be hostile at all toward Link. Now, how do we know that these are related to the Zonai? Well, it's because they actually drop an item when defeated called a Zonai charge. At least the hostile one does. And when we defeat that construct enemy, notice it doesn't explode in the calamity-like energy as the bokoblins do. Instead, it's the green and blue energy. Now, overall with the story, there have been some strong hints, even from Aonuma himself, that the story of Tears of the Kingdom could be darker than Majora's Mask, which is widely recognized as one of the darkest entries in the series. Now, as it relates to the story, we should also point out what we haven't seen. First, we don't see any of the shrines from the first game, but we do see similar sized structures with that mysterious green force swirling around them. Some fans think that that could be Tears of the Kingdom's shrine equivalent. The large Sheikah towers from Breath of the Wild are noticeably different here, and they don't match up with the previous locations. potions. There also isn't any sign of the massive divine beast machines that played such an important role in the first game. Oh, and remember those guardians that just chase you around the whole game? No sign of them either. And then there's the Sheikah Slate, which we haven't seen at all, despite the fact that it was such a core part of the gameplay in the first game. Instead, this time it seems Link's special abilities are controlled by his altered right arm. When it comes to Tears of the Kingdom's gameplay, it makes the most sense if we start with the first game, as it looks like many gameplay elements will carry over. Link can still run, jump, climb, and glide. Weapons still degrade over time, cooking makes a return, and the minimap still includes temperature, weather, and sound gauges. Tears of the Kingdom is also confirmed to take place in the very same Hyrule as Breath of the Wild. This actually marks the first time in the history of the series that we've returned to the same Hyrule as a previous game, unless of course you count like Link Between Worlds, which used the same Hyrule as Link to the Past. Now, when we combine this with the fact that Aonuma said Nintendo had so many ideas for a Breath of the Wild DLC that they couldn't fit into an actual DLC, we actually start to touch on one of the issues that fans have brought up with the footage and details that have been revealed so far about Tears of the Kingdom, and that's that it's just too similar to its predecessor. But on the flip side, Nintendo has stated Tears of the Kingdom is its own game, and the recent gameplay reveals showed off quite a few differences both in the gameplay and in the landscape when compared to the first game. In fact, the recent gameplay demo focused almost solely on showing off 4 of Link's new abilities and the many ways that they're going to affect gameplay. Those abilities are Recall, Fuse, Ultra Hand, and Ascend. All 4 of them are controlled with Link's right arm and are somehow powered by that green force. They each have their own corresponding icon and can be activated with the L shoulder button. Recall is an ability that allows Link to reverse the path of a moving object. We saw him use this ability in combat on the spike rolling down the hill here in one of the previous trailers. The gameplay demo showed Recall being used more as a traversal mechanic. Link can use it on the large stone block that's falling from the sky here, and this is one way to reach the Sky Islands. Apparently though, this is just one of the many ways that we'll be able to reach them. There are these rails that we know Link can ride on. We see that in another trailer. Perhaps this is another way that we'll travel up to these Sky Islands as well. And is it just me, or did Nintendo specifically choose to focus the camera on this dragon just as they mentioned other ways to reach Sky Islands? I don't know, dude. Flying a dragon would be pretty awesome. The second ability is Fuse. While weapons will still break, Fuse enables players to combine 2 objects to make a weapon both more powerful and more durable. Nintendo showed several different use cases for Fuse. The first with a tree branch and a rock, which combine together to form a makeshift hammer. Then they showed Link fusing a long stick to a pitchfork, which creates a weapon that can attack from even further away. Fuse doesn't only apply to Link's melee weapons though. He can also fuse items to arrows, such as a white choo-choo jelly, which makes it an ice arrow. You can even fuse Keith's eyeballs to create an arrow that will now home in on its target. We also see them fuse a puff shroom to Link's shield, which results in a cloud of smoke whenever it's struck by an enemy. And while we don't know how this will work exactly, the gameplay did confirm that enemies we encounter can also have fused weapons. Knowing how many items were in Breath of the Wild, it seems like a pretty safe bet to say that what we've seen so far with Fuse is only scratching the surface of the many different variations you can come up with in Tears of the Kingdom. There are sure to be a ridiculous number of customization options for Fuse in the final game. This seemingly unlimited potential applies to the next ability Nintendo showcased as well, Ultra Hand. With this, players can essentially glue different objects from the world together to make their own creations to help them overcome obstacles and challenges. In the demo, Link glues logs together to form a raft. He uses Ultra Hand again to add 2 powered fans, which are activated by striking them. Once they're in place and aligned in the right position, they'll power the raft across the river. Notice there is a single battery indicator when the fans are running. It does appear to refill on its own after a cooldown period. Fans have speculated that the green vials on Link's belt could possibly act as some sort of wireless source of energy for items that require this battery power. Nintendo didn't comment on them in the demo, but the minimap did show some new icons we haven't seen before, and one of them happens to be a battery icon. Perhaps that's a location where Link could find another vial to add to his belt, which could in turn add an additional battery to power certain machines even longer before they need to recharge. After all, we've seen these flying vehicles that are far more advanced than the raft they made in the gameplay demo. There are even flying creations like this one, and in order for this one to fly very high, it would certainly need to have more than one battery to power it. You can see here it just barely lifts off the ground with one. They even confirmed that the Ultra Hand ability is how we'll create the vehicles we've seen so far in other trailers. And we know we'll be able to use these vehicles to travel by land, air, or water. The final ability they touched on is Ascend. If you're in a location with a ceiling, you can use Ascend to travel up and through the floor above. They show the ability a second time inside a cave that has a hill above it. Of course, you'll still be able to climb using your stamina if you choose, but Ascend seems like it will be a quick way to reach the top of structures so long as there's a ceiling and floor above. And while they didn't show this one, they did mention that if you ever find yourself stuck in a cage with a ceiling, that you can use Ascend to get out. Seems like an oddly specific example there if you ask me, maybe a little tease of something to come later in the game. Breath of the Wild focused heavily on overcoming the environment, much more so than any Zelda game before it. And overall, it appears Nintendo is certainly doubling down on that sandbox-style formula that played a key role in making the first game such an incredible success. They want you to explore the world and overcome its many obstacles, not by simply picking up and using the tools they provided, but also by using your imagination and creativity to test the limits of those tools and what they can do inside the world around you. It remains to be seen if Nintendo is bringing back any gameplay elements inspired by non-Breath of the Wild Zelda titles, such as traditional dungeons, a longtime staple of the series and much requested addition for Tears of the Kingdom. As for locations, we know the game takes place in the same Hyrule as Breath of the Wild, and many of the locations we know from the game should return here, but possibly with a twist, in a different state, or maybe even inhabited by different groups of people or enemies. The most notable new addition are the Sky Islands. There's evidence that points to these being related to the Zonai, such as the stone dragon heads that look similar to the ones found in the Zonai ruins back in Breath of the Wild. The yellow trees and vegetation seen in the gameplay demo are also very different from what we've seen throughout the rest of Hyrule. The Sky Islands are seen all over the world in the gameplay that we've seen so far, and it appears they can vary in both size and how far they are from the ground, which could explain why the minimap now displays altitude in addition to latitude and longitude. We've seen plenty of familiar enemies as well that are set to make a return, including both moblins and bokoblins, the stone Talos, which appears to have a new variant with an enemy fort on top of it, Lizalfos, Hinoxes, Bossblins, and a soldier construct, which is the enemy we talked about earlier and likely connected to the Zonai. As for some other new enemies, there's a flying creature that has the ability to transport bokoblins, as well as a zombie-like enemy that's almost certain to mark the return of Redeads, which have long been one of the most terrifying enemies in the series. There's also a massive golem enemy that's made up by many of these stone cubes. And then there's the dragon that's been clearly visible in the trailers, at least from afar. Swords, shields, bows, arrows, and many of the consumable items from Breath of the Wild will make a return here. Nintendo has already shown us a few ways that these familiar items can be used for different effects in Tears of the Kingdom, specifically with the fuse ability. Food, rupees, heart containers, and the stamina gauge are also back. The Sheikah Slate appears to be out and at least somewhat replaced by Link's new arm. And then there are the green vials on Link's belt, which we can only speculate on at this point. The gameplay demo also showed the Puff Shroom, a Zonai Charge, Soldier Construct Horn, Korok Frond, and a Stam Bulb. And with that new fuse ability, there are sure to be a ridiculous amount of new items that players will be able to craft on their own. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom will for sure be one of the biggest titles of 2023, but even with everything we've seen so far, there are some concerns fans have. I actually share some of these concerns, even though I'm still really looking forward to the game. A lot of these stem from the fact that the game is taking place in the same Hyrule as before, one many players have already explored in great detail, and despite the well-received critical and commercial success of Breath of the Wild, there are plenty of vocal fans who were hoping to see more of a return to the style of previous Zelda games. There's also the reality that the game was originally rooted in DLC ideas rather than a totally new sequel, and it is in fact releasing on the aging Nintendo Switch, hardware that is significantly underpowered compared to modern PCs, the PS5, and the Xbox Series X. If you'd like to hear more about those concerns, then check out the video on the right side of your screen next. Also, big shout out to all of our channel members of House RACONTEUR. Thank you so much for your continued support here on the channel. And guys, if you aren't a member yet, you can read all about the benefits by clicking on the community tab below. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.